The Potala Palace in Lhasa, Tibet Autonomous Region was the chief residence of the Dalai Lama until the 14th Dalai Lama fled to India during the 1959 Tibetan uprising. It is now a museum and World Heritage Site. The palace is named after Mount Potalaka, the mythical abode of the bodhisattva Avalokiteśvara. The fifth Dalai Lama started its construction in 1645 after one of his spiritual advisors, Konchog Chophel, pointed out that the site was ideal as a seat of government, situated as it is between Drepung and Sera monasteries and the old city of Lhasa. It may overlay the remains of an earlier fortress called the White or Red Palace on the site, built by Songtsen Gampo in 637. The building measures 400 meters east-west and 350 meters north-south, with sloping stone walls averaging 3 meters thick and 5 meters thick at the base, and with copper poured into the foundations to help proof it against earthquakes. 13 stories of buildings, containing over 1,000 rooms, 10,000 shrines and about 200,000 statues, soar 117 meters on top of Mapori, the Red Hill, rising more than 300 meters in total above the valley floor. Tradition has it that the three main hills of Lhasa represent the three protectors of Tibet. Chokpori, just to the south of the Potala, is the sole mountain of Vajrapani, Pongwari that of Manjushri, and Mapori. The hill on which the Potala stands represents Avalokiteśvara. History. The site on which the Potala Palace rises is built over a palace erected by Songtsen Gampo on the Red Hill. The Potala contains 2 chapels on its northwest corner that conserve parts of the original building. One is the Phakpa Lokang, the other the Chojal Drupak, a recessed cavern identified as Songtsen Gampo's meditation cave. Losang Gyatso, the great fifth Dalai Lama, started the construction of the modern Potala Palace in 1645 after one of his spiritual advisors, Konchog Chophel, pointed out that the site was ideal as a seat of government, situated as it is between Drepung and Sera monasteries and the old city of Lhasa. The external structure was built in 3 years, while the interior, together with its furnishings, took 45 years to complete. The Dalai Lama and his government moved into the Potang Kapo in 1649. Construction lasted until 1694, some 12 years after his death. The Potala was used as a winter palace by the Dalai Lama from that time. The Potang Mapo was added between 1690 and 1694. The new palace got its name from a hill on Cape Comorin at the southern tip of India, a rocky point sacred to the bodhisattva of compassion, who is known as Avalokiteśvara or Changrezi. The Tibetans themselves rarely speak of the sacred place as the Potala, but rather as Peak Potala, or usually as the Peak. The palace was slightly damaged during the Tibetan uprising against the Chinese in 1959, when Chinese shells were launched into the palace's windows. It also escaped damage during the Cultural Revolution in 1966 through the personal intervention of Zhou Enlai, who was then the Premier of the People's Republic of China. Still, almost all of the over 100,000 volumes of scriptures, historical documents and other works of art were either removed, damaged or destroyed. The Potala Palace was inscribed to the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1994. In 2000 and 2001, Jokang Temple and Norbilinka were added to the list as extensions to the site's rapid modernization has been a concern for UNESCO, however, which expressed concern over the building of modern structures immediately around the palace which threatened the palace's unique atmosphere. The Chinese government responded by enacting a rule barring the building of any structure taller than 21 meters in the area. UNESCO was also concerned over the materials used during the restoration of the palace, which commenced in 2002 at a cost of RMB 180 million. Although the palace's director, Kyangba Gesang, has clarified that only traditional materials and craftsmanship were used, the palace has also received restoration works between 1989 and 1994, costing RMB 55 million. The number of visitors to the palace was restricted to 1,600 a day, with opening hours reduced to 6 hours daily to avoid overcrowding from the 1st of May 2003. The palace was receiving an average of 1,500 a day prior to the introduction of the quota, sometimes peaking to over 5,000 in one day. Visits to the structure's roof was banned after restoration works were completed in 2006 to avoid further structural damage. Visitorship quotas were raised to 2,300 daily to accommodate a 30% increase in visitorship since the opening of the Qingzhang Railway into Lhasa on 1 July 2006, but the quota is often reached by mid-morning. Opening hours were extended during the peak period in the months of July to September, where over 6,000 visitors would descend on the site. Architecture, built at an altitude of 3,700 meters, on the side of Mapori in the center of Lhasa Valley, the Potala Palace, with its vast inward sloping walls broken only in the upper parts by straight rows of many windows, and its flat roofs at various levels, is not unlike a fortress in appearance. At the south base of the rock is a large space enclosed by walls and gates, with great porticos on the inner side. A series of tolerably easy staircases broken by intervals of gentle ascent leads to the summit of the rock. The whole width of this is occupied by the palace. The central part of this group of buildings rises in a vast quadrangular mass above its satellites to a great height, terminating in gilt canopies similar to those on the Jokang. This central member of Potala is called the Red Palace, from its crimson color, which distinguishes it from the rest. It contains the principal halls and chapels and shrines of past Dalai Lamas. There is in these much rich decorative painting, with jeweled work, carving and other ornamentation. The Chinese Putuo Zongcheng Temple, also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, built between 1767 and 1771, was in part modeled after the Potala Palace. The palace was named by the American television show Good Morning America and newspaper USA Today as one of the new Seven Wonders. White Palace. The White Palace of Potrangkapo is the part of the Potala Palace that makes up the living quarters of the Dalai Lama. The first White Palace was built during the lifetime of the 5th Dalai Lama, and he and his government moved into it in 1649. It then was extended to its size today by the 13th Dalai Lama in the early 20th century. The palace contained the living quarters, offices, the seminary and the printing house. A central, yellow-painted courtyard known as a Diangsha separates the living quarters of the Lama and his monks with the Red Palace. The other side of the sacred Potala, which is completely devoted to religious study and prayer. It contains the sacred guild stupas, the tombs of 8 Dalai Lamas, the monks' assembly hall, numerous chapels and shrines, and libraries for the important Buddhist scriptures. The Kangyur in 108 volumes and the Tangyur with 225. The yellow building at the side of the White Palace in the courtyard between the main palaces houses giant banners embroidered with holy symbols which hung across the south face of the Potala during New Year festivals. Red Palace. The Red Palace at Potrang Mapo is part of the Potala Palace that is completely devoted to religious study and Buddhist prayer. It consists of a complicated layout of many different halls, chapels and libraries on many different levels with a complex array of smaller galleries and winding passages. Great West Hall. The main central hall of the Red Palace is the Great West Hall, which consists of 4 great chapels that proclaim the glory and power of the builder of the Potala, the 5th Dalai Lama. The hall is noted for its fine murals reminiscent of Persian miniatures depicting events in the 5th Dalai Lama's life. The famous scene of his visit to the Shunxi Emperor in Beijing is located on the east wall outside the entrance. Special cloth from Bhutan wraps the hall's numerous columns and pillars. The Saints' Chapel. On the north side of this hall in the Red Palace is an important shrine of the Potala. The chapel, like the Dharma cave below it, dates from the 7th century. It contains a small ancient jewel-encrusted statue of Avalokiteśvara and 2 of his attendants. On the floor below, a low, dark passage leads into the Dharma cave where Songtsen Gampo is believed to have studied Buddhism. In the holy cave are images of Songtsen Gampo, his wives, his chief minister and Sambhota, the scholar who developed Tibetan writing in the company of his many divinities. North Chapel. The North Chapel centers on a crowned Sakyamuni Buddha on the left and the 5th Dalai Lama on the right. On the far left of the chapel is the gold stupa tomb of the 11th Dalai Lama, who died as a child, with rows of benign medicine Buddhas who were the heavenly healers. On the right of the chapel are Avalokiteśvara and his historical incarnations, including Songtsen Gampo and the first 4 Dalai Lamas. Scriptures covered in silk between wooden covers form a specialized library in a room branching off it. South Chapel. The South Chapel centers on Padmasambhava, the 8th century Indian magician and saint. His consort Yeshogil, a gift from the king, is by his left knee, and his other wife from his native land of Swat is by his right. On his left, 8 of his holy manifestations meditate with an inturned gaze. On his right, 8 wrathful manifestations wield instruments of magic powers to subdue the demons of the Bon Faith. East Chapel. The East Chapel is dedicated to Tsongkhapa, founder of the Gelug tradition. His central figure is surrounded by lamas from Sakya Monastery who had briefly ruled Tibet and formed their own tradition until converted by Tsongkhapa. Other statues are displayed made of various different materials and display noble expressions. West Chapel. This is the chapel that contains the 5 golden stupas. The enormous central stupa, 14.85 meters high, contains the mummified body of the 5th Dalai Lama. This stupa is built of sandalwood and is remarkably coated in gold and studded with 18,680 pearls and semi-precious jewels. On the left is the funeral stupa for the 12th Dalai Lama, and on the right that of the 10th Dalai Lama. The nearby stupa for the 13th Dalai Lama is 22 meters high. The stupas on both ends contain important scriptures. First Gallery. The first gallery is on the floor above the West Chapel and has a number of large windows that give light and ventilation to the Great West Hall and its chapels below. Between the windows, superb murals show the Potala's construction is fine detail. Second Gallery. The second gallery gives access to the central pavilion, which is used for visitors to the palace for refreshments and to buy souvenirs. Third Gallery. The third gallery, besides fine murals, has a number of dark rooms branching off it containing enormous collections of bronze statues. The chanting hall of the 7th Dalai Lama is on the south side, and on the eastern entrance connects the section to the Saints' Chapel and the Yangsha between the 2 palaces. Tomb of the 13th Dalai Lama. The tomb of the 13th Dalai Lama is located west of the Great West Hall, and it can be reached only from an upper floor and with the company of a monk, or a guide of the Potala. Built in 1933, the giant stupa is 14 meters high. Devotional offerings include elephant tusks from India, porcelain lions and vases. Elaborate murals in traditional Tibetan styles depict many events of the life of the 13th Dalai Lama during the early 20th century. The Lhasa Jol Pillars. Lhasa Jol village has 2 stone pillars or RDO rings, an interior stone pillar adoring Nangma, which stands within the village fortification walls, and the exterior stone pillar adoring Chima, which originally stood outside the south entrance to the village. Today the pillar stands neglected to the east of the Liberation Square, on the south side of Beijing Avenue. The adoring Chima dates as far back as c. 764, or only a little later, and is inscribed with what may be the oldest known example of Tibetan writing. The pillar contains dedications to a famous Tibetan general and gives an account of his services to the king, including campaigns against China which culminated in the brief capture of the Chinese capital Chang'an in 763, during which the Tibetans temporarily installed as emperor a relative of Princess Jincheng Gongzhu, the Chinese wife of Trisong Detson's father. Miagtsom. Gallery.